Who are the biggest winners and losers of NFL free agency? Welcome, football fans, to another BLV NFL video. In this video, 8 winners and 7 losers from this year's free agency frenzy. Shout out Sidney Crosby. Gronk, spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Let's get to it. Beginning with the biggest winners of NFL free agency. And in the comments, let me know if you agree or disagree with my winners and my losers. The first team that I think was a big time winner of free agency is the Chicago Bears. The Bears, because they improved both their offensive line and their defensive line immensely. First, the offensive line. Not only can you now protect Caleb Williams from the interior, a quarterback that, let's be honest, his biggest flaw is that he loves to be the backyard hero. He loves to play on the playground, do spinoramas, run around in circles, and flip the ball underhanded for 20 yards. That's his biggest weakness. He likes to hold on to the ball. So what do? You install an awesome offensive line in front of him so that he can hold on to the ball, he can create, and he can be the Caleb Williams that you drafted him to be, the creative genius. Also a creative genius is Ben Johnson. And what do you need with a Ben Johnson offense? We saw in Detroit, it helps to have an awesome offensive line that you can lean on opponents with to run the football. So you add Joe Thuney, a trade with the Chiefs, to get arguably the best guard in football. This guy is the most consistent pass blocker at the position. He even showcased he could play left tackle in a pinch, something he hasn't really done throughout his entire career. A career where he has won multiple Super Bowls with multiple teams. He has been a part of 2 dynasties. He's a winner, he's a leader, he is tough as nails, and he is really good at football. So you have him now at left guard. At right guard, Jonah Jackson, a player that was really good with Detroit, that worked inside this Ben Johnson offense as a run blocker, especially. And now you get him fresh off 1 down year at a little bit of a cheaper rate. You get a starting caliber, maybe above average right guard. Center, probably the best on the market this offseason, Drew Dahlman. Top 10 center in football, excellent moving in space, really good run blocker. So now the Bears probably have a top, at least half of the league, maybe top 10 in the league, maybe even top 5 in the league, offensive line. Going from a suspect unit to potentially a very good one, that's a big leap. That's a great free agency alone. But then you add a couple pieces to the defensive line, an area that was super underrated for the need of the Chicago Bears. The biggest need on the roster, in my opinion, was the defensive end opposite Montez Sweat. It wasn't left guard. It wasn't right guard. It wasn't center. To me, it was the defensive end opposite Montez Sweat. Who is going to play that position? They bring in Odenigbo from the Indianapolis Colts on 3 years, $48 million. A guy that's an ascending football player that is picture perfect for filling the Cameron Jordan role, the Cameron Jordan mold, right? Dennis Allen, the new defensive coordinator, wants that big, strong side edge guy that can set the edge and have a little extra versatility and flair as a pass rusher. And that's what they're getting here. So you've got a nice edge, too, to add to the lineup. You get a veteran presence to the defense that they desperately needed for leadership purposes, but also a guy that can still play as a starting caliber defensive tackle, Grady Jarrett. Right after he was cut by the Falcons, he joins the Bears. So you get Grady Jarrett, and man, now all of a sudden, your defensive front and your offensive line are way better. I wouldn't say your defensive line is one of the best in the league, but it's certainly a lot more capable than it was to complement an already young and talented secondary. So the Bears are looking real nice. Not only that, did they bring in a Zacchaeus at wide receiver 3, who I like. I thought he played well for Washington last season, to fill in potentially and replace Keenan Allen, potentially. We'll see what happens there. They also re-sign a couple other players, depth options on the roster. So overall, Chicago accomplished what they needed to, which was protecting Caleb Williams, getting that run game kick-started for Ben Johnson, allowing your two biggest assets, your coach and your quarterback, to thrive with an offensive line. And then you add that defensive line on top of it, it's picture perfect. All right, next up, the next big winner of free agency is the New England Patriots. It is literally a new New England Patriots team. They have added so much talent, especially to the defensive side of the football, that Patriots fans should be very excited, because this defense could be turned around in a single offseason with these additions. Milton Williams was, in my opinion, for the price, the age, right, the fit, the position, all that sort of stuff, he was the number one free agent on the market. The Patriots brought in a player that's just entering his prime, that has the unique voice on the football field to be an interior wrecker, an interior pass rusher, a guy that can demand double teams, win one-on-ones, get to the quarterback, and be disruptive. And so now Mike Vrabel has his Jeffrey Simmons in his Patriot defense, and that is Milton Williams. Now, just imagine if Christian Barmore gets healthy. That could be arguably the best combination of defensive tackles we know in football today. That could make them extremely tough on the defensive line, especially when you combine that with Harold Landry, who knows this defense very well, this scheme very well. He's thrived in it. He's had 10+ sacks in it. And yeah, he's not quite the player or pass rusher that he used to be. And yeah, he's had an injury or two, but he's been a top run defender, a top edge setter. For a Patriots defense that was really bad against the run last year, this was desperately needed, guys. Desperately needed. So Harold Landry, big time for the Patriots. He has those sacks. He can get to the quarterback. He's a finisher. So he's a guy that might more win with effort, win by tracking you down, win through the games and the stunts that this Vrabel defensive scheme might bring to the Patriot defensive line. Where Milton Williams is going to engage the offensive line. He's going to cause havoc. Harold Landry's going to be the guy to clean it up, right? You combine that with Keon White, all of a sudden you're talking about a pretty dangerous edge duo as well, with the versatility to work in a multitude of different ways. Carlton Davis is a CB1 in my opinion in the NFL. He's been one of my favorite corners in football because he plays with a relentlessness, a physicality. He's great in press. He can play man. He can play zone. He's very smart, and he's a unique corner because he's got very good length and pretty solid size. He brings a little bit of a physical dimension to the secondary that is very Patriot of the 2000s, right? This is very Mike Vrabel Patriot-esque corner here. This is kind of in the mold of a Ty Law type of guy where he's going to get in your face. Not quite that good, but you understand what I'm saying. Carlton Davis fits a Patriot cornerback, and he's going to be a great complement as the 2 to Christian Gonzalez's 1. Because Davis, his one weakness, I would say, is the speed, the pure speed. So he doesn't match up exactly that well with pure speed guys, but when it comes to physical guys or taller wide receivers, or even guys that are more kind of jitterbug, like underneath type of guys, he can stick with a lot of different type of players, and he could play man at a very high rate. His problem is more so injury concerns, but honestly, that kind of does happen to a lot of corners in the NFL. So as long as he can stay healthy, this is going to be an awesome CB2 that could really combine to become the best corner combination in football, especially if you're talking about the Patriots playing a above average rate of man coverage, to where this position could be extremely important for their success. So I really like this signing. Then you have Robert Spillane, who's been super underrated. And honestly, I don't think enough Patriots people that I listen to really give the credit to how good of a signing this is. It does appear expensive, 3 years, $37 million for a Robert Spillane, but I don't think people realize how big of a part he's been with the Raiders, how impactful he's been in the pass game, in the run game, as a blitzer. He does everything well that the Patriots would demand a linebacker to do, and he's a leader. He's an IQ, play caller, guy that's going to get the defense set up. He's a locker room presence. He's a really good off the field energy guy. Everything about Robert Spillane, watching him in Las Vegas, this guy is an absolute just dog on the football field. He's going to hit you. He's going to hit you hard. He's going to make you feel it. And he's going to be able to really clean up the run game for this team. Morgan Moses just solidifies and calms down the right tackle position. He also brings a veteran presence. 3 years, $24 million. Nothing else really has to be said. It's just that now you feel confident that the right side of the offensive line with Mike Onwenu and Morgan Moses is clean, and I like that. Caleb Chason, a little bit of a high upside pass rusher for third downs. Very athletic. Got some good bend to him, some good quickness. I liked him coming out of the draft a few years back. He's still never really truly seen that upside come to the NFL, but with one of the best defensive line coaches in football and Mike Vrabel by his side, I feel like there is still potential to be untapped here in a Josh Uche third down type of role, which the Patriots honestly didn't really have an edge like that on their team, so it makes sense. Matt Collins is, Mr. No Socks, Mr. No Shoes, Mr. No Service on Sundays. Matt Collins is going to make an impact, whether it be on special teams, whether it be via a jump ball, a go route. He can get down the field. He can burn you with speed. He can beat you with size. And he's a good X receiver who can block. He brings a lot to a football team. A great presence. A lot of people loved him in Buffalo, and Josh Allen loved him. I think Drake May will like him as well as a depth receiver. Josh Dobbs is a nice little veteran backup option, especially if they do trade their quarterback, Milton, to somebody that might want him. Marcus Epps, actually a low-key budget signing, 1 year, $4.4 million for a guy that started on a Super Bowl defense in Philadelphia 2 years ago, started with Las Vegas for 2 years. This is a starting caliber safety that might be the third safety on New England for not a lot of money. He's also a Josh McDaniels former signing, along with Robert Spillane. Wes Schweister has to be discussed. That's a guy that might or might not make the roster. You would think he would, just because he has so much experience and versatility playing guard or center, and in a pinch he can start. I've seen him do it a lot of times. Tonga is a big nose tackle, replacing Devon Godshaw for much cheaper money. Austin Hooper returns. Devon Godshaw got traded. Dave Andrews being the only real loss that I'm concerned about for this team, because he's experienced. He's an all-time Patriot. He's a legend. And maybe his body is worn down. That's definitely a possible argument. But him knowing McDaniel's offense, him being experienced, him having that just calming presence, I would have loved to have him back for 2025. But if he does retire, I totally understand why they did release him. So I thought the Patriots were absolute winners. And the more that I talk about this, I feel like, yeah, they didn't get a receiver. That sucks. Yeah, they didn't get a left tackle, but at least they got a right tackle. And honestly, the left tackle market was very overpriced. So I understand why they didn't go the route of wide receiver, left tackle. They're going to have to draft those things. And when you look at the concern of defense last year, you added a bunch of really good football players that I feel confident about, and also really good culture guys as well that have plenty of experience winning too. So I love what the Patriots did, not just because I'm a fan, but honestly, this is a dream offseason for me. If you guys know me, I love a lot of these players. I've talked about these players for years on the channel being on other teams. I was a huge Milton Williams guy during the playoffs this year. Carlton Davis, you guys know, I've been a huge Carlton Davis fan. Harold Landry, I've wanted them to draft him 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, whenever he got drafted. Robert Spillane, I had him in my top 20 linebackers last year in the NFL. Like, nobody else in the world had that. Morgan Moses, I've always loved Morgan Moses. Mac Hollins, me and Durkant joke about him all the time. Like, these guys, Kalamon Chason, I liked him coming out of the draft. Josh Dobbs, the Pastronaut. I mean, who doesn't love him? So this is like what a Mitch would do. I mean, honestly, so it's pretty crazy that we're talking about this right now, all right? The next team is the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, the Vikings absolutely crushed free agency. The only concern really is the age of some of these guys like Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, along with injury concerns from Ryan Kelly. Will Fries is really the only guy they signed in his prime that was like a big signing, 5 years, $88 million. He might have been a little overpriced, but I totally understand it because the Vikings, when you watch them play at the end of last season, like their biggest concern was that they got too much interior pass rush from both the Lions and especially the Rams. The Rams ripped their offensive line to shreds. So that was a huge concern this year. Ryan Kelly is a really good center. I think he's been a top 10 center in football since he entered the league. And Fries also takes care of concerns on the left side. With Christian Darrisaw, coming back, that's a really good left side of your line now. Jonathan Allen is really at his peak, been one of my favorite interior defensive linemen for his well-rounded game. Very good pass rush move skill set. Could play in pretty much any scheme and defense. I'm very intrigued to see him, Hargrave, working with Harrison Phillips on that interior three. I think Hargrave still can really rush the passer. His concern is run defense, so perhaps a little bit of a rotation between him, Allen, and Phillips. Like, I could see third down situations where Hargrave and Allen are out there. I could see first down situations where it's more so Allen and Phillips, perhaps. But yeah, I could see how that's a little bit of a compliment and a little bit of a rotation in there. I think Allen could still play at a high level. He had a bit of a down year last year. Hargrave coming off an injury. We'll see if he's able to recover. He's just more so a concern in one facet where I feel like he's very much declined as a run defender, but he's an excellent pass rusher. And Isaiah Rodgers was one of my favorite budget signings I've seen. 2 years, $15 million. Very good with the Colts in more of a zone scheme. Very good with the Eagles in a zone/match scheme. You know what I'm saying? Very good in those style of defenses. I feel like he's good on the outside. He can probably start for them, and I wouldn't be shocked if he had a breakout season under Brian Flores. He's always done well with secondaries and getting the most out of that position. I also feel like he can handle the multitude of coverages because he was under Fangio last year. I like the Thomas pickup for a depth defensive back. He was good in Houston. Eric Wilson's an intriguing depth linebacker signing. They got a swing tackle to go along with it. They're able to protect J.J. McCarthy, a rookie quarterback now. Like, you feel more confident in what they did with the offensive line, where it's been a weakness at center and guard for me for years. Then you've got Byron Murphy returning, where I thought he might leave. Byron Murphy is one of the best, hybrid defensive backs in football. Really good nickel corner. Harrison Phillips is back for not only his presence on the field, but his leadership. Aaron Jones is back, which they could have lost him potentially. Still a very good running back that went for 1,000 yards last year. He's got a complement now in Jordan Mason, who's more of a power back in the mold of like a first and second down ball carrier, can take some of the load off of Aaron Jones's shoulders, maybe allow Aaron Jones to focus more on less rushes, more receiving work, which is probably better for the offense. And Ed Ingram was traded, which honestly is a plus. So you look at what the Vikings did here. They really upgraded the interior of the offense and the defense. And that's crucial when you're talking about trying to defeat teams like the Eagles, like the Rams moving forward, like the Lions that they really struggled with last year. So the Vikings were definitely focused on some of their competition moving forward. And with J.J. McCarthy being on a rookie deal, you want to be able to maximize his rookie deal. You want to be able to secure a protection for him. You want to be able to have the best possible defense around him to take the pressure off of him. You want to be able to have running backs to give the ball to be able to run the ball, right? Everything about having a young quarterback is ensuring his success, right? Putting talent around him so that he can be successful. We knew that he had the receivers. We knew that he had the offensive scheme. We knew that he had the coach, right? And even the defense to a certain degree. But they strengthened every element of their team to ensure success from their young quarterback. So JJ is in one of the best situations in the NFL, period now. thanks to this offseason. It's beautiful from Minnesota. Next, you've got the Washington Commanders. Speaking of great situations for a young quarterback, the Commanders definitely made it a little bit better this offseason. The one area I'd say they're less of a winner than my previous three because I'm a little bit not concerned, but I feel like the defensive side of the football didn't really get better. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like they kind of just swapped some faces. Like, for example, I don't think Jonathan Allen is worse than Javon Kinlaw. I don't think Kinlaw is better than Allen, and Kinlaw is younger, but he's never proven to be very good. He got 3 years, $45 million. That was one of my least favorite signings of the entire offseason. I just felt like he was entirely overpriced. He's never really produced at a high level, so that's a little suspect. I do understand where the fit would come from because he was drafted by the Niners. He played under Robert Saleh, Dan Quinn. Okay, similar sort of tree there. I kind of understand the approach, but at the same time, I feel like that's kind of a downgrade. Now, they did go for some volume with guys like Dietrich Wise and Jacob Martin, players that I like, especially Wise being from New England. He's got that inside-outside versatility, a little bit of a Tank Lawrence, DeMarcus Lawrence light type of player for this defense for Dan Quinn. I would say, though, they lost Dante Fowler, which I think is low-key a pretty big loss because he played like, I want to say at least 800 snaps, closer to 1,000 last year. So he played a lot for them. The biggest area of improvement, in my opinion, could be nickel corner. If they play Jonathan Jones at nickel corner, I think that could be a big improvement. Or even if he plays on the outside, I feel like him as a 2 or even as a nickel, that's a big improvement from what they had last year. He's also just an excellent person, a great leader. He's still got that speed. He can play man coverage for days. So I think that is a great signing for them. Jonathan Jones, he also improves the speed of their defense. I'm not sold on the Will Harris pickup, but he does bring some DB versatility to the nickel or the safety position. Nate Herbig as a backup's fine, whatever. Not really, too big on that. But Laramie Tunsil, Deebo Samuel were their marquee moves. And honestly, like, this has a lot of boom or bust for me. Like, they were expensive players. Tunsil was expensive in the trade, and he is getting closer to 30, 31 years old, to the point where he could fall off a little bit, but he's still a premier pass rusher. And considering that the Daniels offense, Cliff Kingsbury, they're going to be throwing like 35 times a game on average, feels like that type of tackle is much more needed than a guy that is a balanced, like, all-around good tackle. Tunsil is fine in the run game. He's never been known for it. He's an excellent pass blocker if he can cut down on his penalties, right? Tunsil could be a huge addition just because you've got Jaden Daniels. He's a right-handed quarterback. He's one of the quickest, fastest, twitchiest quarterbacks in the league, right? It's hard to sack him from his right because he's looking right at the pass rush. From the left, from the blind side, it's a little bit easier to get to him because he can't see it all the time. It is hard to track him down in space, but if he doesn't see it, he can't do anything about it, right? So securing that left blind side for him is big because to the right side, he could still escape. He's very good at that on that side. So I feel like the right tackle is not nearly as important for him as the left tackle is. And then Deebo Samuel, you've got a guy that could really work in this offense, could be motivated, right? Kind of got, I don't want to say derailed by the Niners, anything like that. Like, it was kind of well earned on both fronts to get rid of him and to move him off. But like, it simply wasn't costly effective for the Niners to have him on their team. I think he's not the same player. I think he's slowing down. I don't know if this move will truly pay off for the Commanders, but there is the upside to where, like, he's a perfect fit for their screen game, their RPO game. He could be great for bringing a yak dimension and a physicality to their offense that they really need, and a complement on the inside of the formation to Terry McLaurin. So that's the vision. I'm just not sure if he'll be able to accomplish it at the same rate anymore. They brought back Bobby Wagner, which is nice not only on the field, but also for leadership. I thought Marcus Mariota was low-key one of their better moves because he played really well as a backup. Zach Ertz was obviously a good move from what he did in the playoffs last year. Noah Brown is back. Tress Way is back. Sheldon Day, KJ Osborne, Jeremy McNichols. They did a lot to bring guys back. Clelin Ferrell, Zane Gonzalez. They're all back, So I just feel like the biggest area where they took an L is their secondary. I feel like the safety position is probably worse right now because they lost multiple pieces at safety. So they're going to have to figure that out. Defensive front, I would argue they're a little bit worse, but it's not huge. But I would argue they're a lot better at left tackle. They could be a lot better at receiver. They're at least banking on that with Deebo Samuel, right? And they're pretty even elsewhere. So I understand the Commanders' approach. They wanted to go all in on Jaden Daniels, and I think they went volume approach on defense. So I really like what they did. I think they're absolute winners because I understand the vision of they want to win now. They want to go all in, and they made those moves necessary to perhaps take themselves to the next level. So I totally understand it. It makes a ton of sense. That's why they're a big winner. Next up, you've got the Denver Broncos, who had many simple moves. Like a short list. We only have about 7 moves that they've made, right? But could be hugely impactful. Hufanga, 3 years, $45 million. All pro in 2022 at safety. Flies around the football field like Troy Polamalu in his prime, right? That's what people envision with the flow, the hair, all that stuff. Plays with a fearlessness. And that's exactly what both these 49ers play with. Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga, they play with that fearlessness. They play with that ferociousness. They play with that physicality. And I actually feel like Vance Joseph's defense is very good at getting the most out of these fast, physical, fearless players. Like, I just think of Budda Baker and how he thrived under Vance Joseph. And to me, that's Hufanga's role. Like, flying around, blitzing from different angles, making tackles at the line of scrimmage, reading the ball and picking it off. Like, he can do all that stuff at his best. Play him close to the line of scrimmage. You've got a gem potentially right there in a safety. Him and Jones are an interesting combination because I feel like both of them can do that. So that's a really good playing off of each other sort of situation. Dre Greenlaw is a total upgrade for the weakest area of their team at linebacker in the middle. He can take care of business covering over the middle of the field. He's now going to be able to run and operate his own show, no longer in the shadow of Fred Warner, which is big for his career. You have concern about coming off an Achilles, but the contract isn't too expensive, so I'm not even really that worried about it. But the upside is immense with this player because he is a one-man tackling machine. He is very good in coverage, and he brings like a borderline psychotic energy to your defense. So Dre Greenlaw is the type of energy that Sean Payton wants. Evan Ingram, 2 years, $23 million, is the Joker, Heath Ledger, right, of this offense. And he's always been a very good receiver, right? Doesn't block, doesn't do that. He can line up in line, he can line up out wide, he can line up in the slot, and you'll see him everywhere in this offense. Sean Payton's had a lot of success with slot receivers, a lot of success with tight ends in his career. And I feel like he's going to use Evan Ingram like the weapon that he is. I'm not sure he's quite the same player, that he was a couple years ago where he had over 100 catches with Jacksonville. But I think he could be moved around and use it as a complement to guys like Courtland Sutton. He's not going to have to catch 100 passes. 70 would be beautiful. And if he can make something happen with his speed after the catch, that would be even better. DJ Jones was a big re-signing for their run defense to keep that intact. They also brought in Trent Sherfield as a special teamer and 4th or 5th receiver. Jared Stidham is a solid backup quarterback. So I feel like the Broncos did what they needed to do. Address their 2 biggest needs, safety and linebacker, and also bring in another weapon for Bo Nix. Everything looks good with Denver outside of maybe wide receiver and running back, right? Like, they could add a little bit more in certain situations, but I think the free agency really handled to limit their needs for the draft. Next, we have the Buffalo Bills. The Bills signed a lot more volume than the Broncos. The problem with the Bills offseason to me was the suspensions. They had 2 defensive linemen they signed that I really like as depth options. Like, as starters, I don't think they're great, but as depth options, I think they're a big-time bonus for the Bills. But they both got suspended, right? Michael Hoyt from the Rams, who's a big hybrid edge rusher, just an absolute beast. And Larry Ogunjobi, who's a well-rounded interior defensive lineman who's played in many systems on many teams and different fronts. So I like both these players. I like how they're going to be able to be like 3rd or 4th in their rotation, and they're good 3s and 4s. Like Ogunjobi as a 3 with Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones, that's perfect. Right? That's what he was with the Steelers last year. He's been a 2 for a lot of his career in that edge rotation, or not the edge rotation, but the interior rotation. Then you're talking about the edge rotation. You got Michael Hoyt, who really good run stuffer, really good edge setter because he's so big. I mean, he's humongous. He's a different type of body type for the Buffalo Bills, but they definitely needed a little bit of run stuffing. So you bring in 2 bigger bodies for this defensive line for those December, January months, for those February potential months where they're going to have to match up with Baltimore, right? These moves are designed to stop a team like Baltimore specifically. You're talking about a power run team, or if they see the Eagles in the Super Bowl. One of the biggest weaknesses of Buffalo last year is their front was simply too small. So you bring in some bigger humans for that defensive front to be able to help them stop the run. I love that. Joey Bosa has always been, really good at stopping the run as well. That was their big ticket item 1 year, $12.6 million. But he's a very good number 2 edge rusher, right? At his best, he's a top 10 edge rusher in football, right? I don't think he's quite that anymore. I still think he's a good 2, a good starter. I think he's well-rounded, still got that speed to power, and a guy that can work off of potentially, on the other side, Gregory Rousseau. I love that a lot. If he was their number 1 edge rusher, I wouldn't love it as much. But as the 2, in a rotation with others like Epinesa and then Hoyt and all these others, yeah, I like it, right? So Joey Bosa, I think that's a really good signing for them. Josh Palmer, I think he's a really interesting player where he's got the inside-outside versatility. He's more so known for getting down the field. He's a good possession receiver. 3 years, $36 million. And I think he's a little bit more of a receiver than Matt Collins is. So he brings them something a little bit different to the table. Darrington Evans is interesting as a depth running back. I'm not sure if he'll make the team, but I've always liked him. Derek Forrest, I love as a signing at safety. Low risk, high reward, special teams ace, but also a guy that can really tackle and I feel like could bring something different to the safety room, maybe even start. Like, I wouldn't be shocked. He's been really underrated. Laviska Shenault could even be a little bit of like a Khalil Shakir backup at slot receiver, but then also a really good returner. He's an electric returner. That helps their special teams. Ty Johnson, loved the re-signing. Gilliam, loved the re-signing. Hamlin, okay, he was a starter last year. Very cheap, 1 year, $2 million. Dane Jackson replaces Kaiir Elam. I think that's an upgrade. Greg Rousseau extended. Josh Allen extended. Khalil Shakir extended. Terrell Bernard extended. Those are huge. I mean, those are 4 foundational pieces. Those might be the 4 foundational pieces of the entire roster. They're at least in the conversation. And then, they did release Von Miller, but basically replace him with Joey Bosa. And Kaiir Elam was basically replaced by Dane Jackson. So the biggest reason I think the Bills are winners is not only did they get to extend some of their guys, they got deeper on the defensive front. They added some players I like at other positions. But compared to teams like Kansas City and Baltimore, I think they did the best job of getting actually better, which I think is a huge bonus for free agency winners. The Carolina Panthers, I think, are a winner as well. Tershawn Wharton, 3 years, $54 million was, I think, their biggest signing. He is a slippery interior pass rusher, a guy that I feel like can make an impact beside Derek Brown, somebody that is going to be able to rush the quarterback, get a little pass rush, but also can hold up on the defensive front in a multitude of ways. Like, he'll be interesting to see how they use him in the alignment, because he actually came into the NFL as an edge rusher and then transitioned to a defensive tackle under Spagnuolo. Still performed okay against the run, but I feel like he's a little undersized. He can be overpowered, so he's maybe more of a rotation force as a pass rusher, but I could see him playing on the edge in certain run snaps and early downs. So you've got a little versatility with him as well. A guy that a lot of people liked as an upside, younger option in free agency. Trayvon Moehrig, another younger player, and I really like how the Panthers addressed all their needs with guys that are like 26 years old, because that's perfect, right? They didn't want to go for older names like Jadeveon Clowney like last year, because they're not quite in that playoff situation, but they're kind of creeping up the division ladder, right? And these guys are going to help them do that. So Trayvon Moehrig, I think he's better in the box than he is at free safety. Very good tackler, very good in space. In that regard. And I think he's really going to upgrade that position, hopefully for the next 3 years. They've been trying to go like with 1 year contract type guys at that safety position. Hasn't really worked out. I feel like Moehrig will be very solid for them. Patrick Jones. I've liked Patrick Jones. He always stood out watching the Vikings. I think he's a really good blitzing piece. Very good against the run. One of the better edge setters. He's very big. And he could play like a little bit of a hybrid edge off-ball linebacker type of role. So he's also a really good fit with this Frankie Louvu style of Panther defensive front, where they like to mix and match their players. Then you've got Bobby Brown, who's just a big nose tackle to be able to stop the run, which, I mean, I don't know how many times I just watched. I feel like the Panthers lost to the Bucs last year late last season just because they could not stop the run right up the middle. Like, it was absolutely embarrassing. They lost to Kansas City because they couldn't stop the run up the middle. Like, Kareem Hunt just kept getting 3rd and 4 every single time. So having a guy like Bobby Brown is hugely impactful just to make those 3rd and 4s, an attempted run on 3rd and 4, not manageable, or like a 1st down and 10, not 2nd and 3, but 2nd and 7. You know what I mean? Like, a Bobby Brown makes a difference. Rico Dowdle is I think, an excellent backup running back. He can do everything well, and I think he'll be a pass downs back to complement Hubbard in that backfield. He's a better receiver than Hubbard, so I see a clear role for him to get on the field. Sam Martin, a decent punter, fine. Christian Roseboom played a ton of snaps for a playoff team in the Rams last year. I don't know if he's going to be a backup or a starter, but the experience is there, the intelligence, the IQ is there. Doesn't move the best. He's a little bit bigger at the linebacker position. Could help their run defense, perhaps. They were signed a plethora of players as well. The one that I like the most is probably Michael Jackson. I thought he was very underrated at CB2 for them on the outside. They got him for 2 years, $14.5 million. I think he's always been solid, too. I think he definitely has a skill set. J.C. Horn was extended. Not sure about that one given his injury history, but it's one of their more, like, not only coveted players, but it's one of their franchise players. So I understand locking him down to have that CB1 to match up across the NFL, especially in a division with Mike Evans. That definitely matters. And then they released Miles Sanders, so they upgraded at running back, in my opinion. So the Carolina Panthers honestly really didn't lose anything. They only got better. I think they added like 4 or 5 starters to their defense. Most importantly, their offense. They really need a receiver, but I think they really upgraded the defensive side that was historically bad last year. Next, we've got the New York Giants to finish off the winners of the video, guys. Gronk, spike the like button if you haven't already. We're going deep on these winners and losers. So, the New York Giants. I love what they did because even without a quarterback, I thought they put themselves in a position to where before free agency, they weren't a quarterback away from being competitive, right? But after free agency, they are. If you look at their roster, they have a slight weakness on the offensive line. But otherwise on offense, they have everything you want, right? They've got a clear number 1 receiver. They've got a clear slot option. They've got a nice number 3. They've got a young athletic tight end. They've got a young running back that I like that can play in both dimensions of the game, right? So they have all that. They have a left tackle. They have a steady right tackle. So the interior O-line is a bit suspect. But if you have a quarterback to that mix, you've got an offense. Defensively, they've got a stud defensive game changer in Dexter Lawrence. They brought in Javon Holland, who I think some people would argue is a top 10 safety in football. He can fly across the field. He's one of the fastest, rangiest safeties in the NFL. He's going to fix their big play defense, which they gave up so many explosives last year, and he can hit and bring a physical force. He is going to really command that back end. Paulson Adebo at his best is a CB1 that can really be feisty and physical on the perimeter, playing press against top receivers in football. I love those type of guys. And Adebo is very underrated if he can stay healthy, still in his prime, like not even barely just getting into his prime, right? So, you know, Adebo isn't quite like a top end corner, but he's a good corner. Like I'd put him in the top 32 in the NFL, right? So he's a CB1. So you've got Adebo, you've got Holland. That addresses 2 of your biggest needs. It moves guys like Banks down the depth chart. It lessens the load of some of your younger players like Newbin that you drafted last year, right? Chauncey Golston is a good number 3 edge rusher. I think they're probably replacing Ojulari with him, right? So you've got Golston, who's more of a well-rounded, bigger edge rusher that can maybe set the edge and stop the run a bit better. And Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. I mean, so you're talking about, and you've already got a linebacker in Okereke. So, I mean, you really look at this defense. I mean, they could have a top 10 defense. They've got the number 1 corner now. They've got the number 1 safety now. They've got a number 1 linebacker now. They've got a big-time nose tackle. They've got multiple edge rushers that can get it done. So you look at, and then they bring in a guy that I've always liked, Roy Robertson Harris, a defensive tackle, 5 tech / 3 tech / like run stuffer / pass rusher. I feel like he is a better pass rusher than run defender right now, but he's huge. And I think he'll really be a nice compliment because Lawrence is going to take on double teams constantly because he's a force. And Harris is a guy that can really benefit off of those type of looks. Chris Board is nice for your special teams, and I like the re-signings of Greg Van Roten, Darius Slayton. Those are re-signings I really, really like. I'm surprised they got Slayton back, given how many teams really needed a receiver. But yeah, I love what the Giants did, because I think if you look at their team right now, if they had a quarterback, they would be a playoff team, arguably, or in the mix. And that's a huge game changer from where they were. I mean, they're picking third in the draft, guys. And it really was because their quarterback was so terrible and their secondary was so terrible last year. And they had some injuries. But those two areas are really their huge concerns. And they at least addressed one of them in a big-time way. So now we're going to move to the losers. The first loser on my list, and this is not really in order, but I have the Philadelphia Eagles, and it's a good kind of segue or transition from the Giants because they're in the same division. I feel like the Eagles definitely lost some critical pieces for their football team, and I don't think people are quite realizing it yet, but they lost a starting safety in C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who they decided to trade for really no reason. Feels like the Eagles, they covet C.J. Gardner-Johnson one year, they get rid of him the next. Weird, odd. He's a 6 interception per year type of guy when he plays for the Philadelphia Eagles. So I don't know why you would trade that guy other than just like he's a yapper. I don't really know why else. Darius Slay has been a steady veteran presence in the back end for seasons. A good CB2 in my opinion. Might be slowing down a bit, but still a player that last year looked real good on the other side of Quinyon Mitchell, and at least you could rely on him. Now, they did bring in Adoree Jackson, a very similar mold and older player. Probably has more speed to his game than Slay, but I don't think he's quite as savvy as Slay is at this point. James Bradbury was released. Who cares? Okay, Kenny Pickett was traded. Doesn't really bother me, but Hurts has missed a couple games per year the last couple of years, it feels like. So a good backup is something that is kind of important for them. Saquon Barkley gets extended. That's nice. Like, that's a clap, but like, it doesn't really do anything for me. Zach Bond was re-signed. Yeah, that's awesome. He's arguably the best linebacker entering next year. He's in the top 3 in football. I don't think without a debate. I think he's right alongside the elite of the elite at the position. So it makes sense they brought him back. It makes sense he wanted to go back. So that was one of their better moves. But they traded for Kenyon Green. You know, they got him for C.J. Gardner-Johnson, which was bizarre because Kenyon Green is awful at football. And he'll be a backup this year. Like, there's no way they would really want him to be a starter. I mean, unless he has an immensely improved training camp. Harrison Bryant was a decent signing as a depth tight end. Josh Uche was an interesting signing with a lot of upside for their edge rush. He's kind of similar to a Nolan Smith in the regards to he's small, but he's really quick and twitchy. Like, he's not a good run defender, I should say, but he is quick, twitchy, and a great pass rusher. So I wouldn't be shocked if he put up 10 sacks. He has that type of upside. It's just that he hasn't been in that type of role in New England. A.J. Dillon is kind of overrated based on his draft position and his name, but I feel like he's an okay running back too. But really, when you look at it, like, they lost Milton Williams, they lost Josh Sweat, they lost C.J. Gardner-Johnson, they lost Darius Slay, they lost Oren Burks, they lost Becton, right? So they lost a lot of starters, and even Kenneth Gainwell, you know, as a complimentary running back is not a big deal, but they lost him too. So you're looking at the Eagles like, yeah, they're definitely worse. They're definitely a loser. They lost a lot of players that were hugely impactful in the Super Bowl. Sweat and Williams, you know, big-time marquee. Becton, marquee. But you're talking about players that played a ton for them, right? A ton of snaps. Like, Sweat was a starter. Williams was a starter. Becton was a starter. Gardner-Johnson was a starter. Bond was a starter in the Super Bowl. Okay, so you're talking about all these players that started, played a lot of snaps. Those are big critical losses, and that's where we're going to transition to the next loser, where it's the San Francisco 49ers, a team that a lot of people are looking at as the biggest loser in free agency. I would probably say on the basis of losing talent, it would be the Eagles. Okay, but on the basis of adding talent back, it might be the Niners. The Niners did sign quite a few players. It's just none of them are really marquee additions. Like, Demarcus Robinson's a pretty good football player, but is he the 3rd or the 4th receiver? Like, if Brandon Ayuk can't really go early in the year, I guess he's the 3rd receiver. When Brandon Ayuk returns, he's the 4th receiver. So, you know, like, how big of an addition is he? It's only $9.5 million, though. Mac Jones might be like a pretty interesting addition because Brock Purdy has a contract negotiation to go through. Mac Jones is a steady, good backup, and he probably will work in Kyle Shanahan's offense pretty effectively. I mean, Kyle wanted him for years. He wanted him in the draft. I really think Jason Pinnock could be their biggest signing because he's really good as a blitzer. He's really good as a tackler. I could see him starting on this defense. I wouldn't be surprised, or at least play a pretty interesting rotation role. Richie Grant, the same thing. I feel like those two guys, where Richie Grant is a free safety that they don't really have, I feel like, and he has started in the NFL before and put up over 100 tackles. He's got some range to him. So I feel like, Brown isn't necessarily the free safety you would want out there, and Mustafa appears to be their strong safety. So I could see Grant starting too. I think both these safeties are pretty interesting low-key pickups. Trey Brown will probably operate as their fourth corner, but that's fine. Luke Farrell is their second tight end as a blocker, which is something that adds a little bit of a different dimension to their offense since they didn't really have that last year. So I guess that's kind of interesting. They managed to bring back Kyle Juszczyk. That was really dramatic. But when you talk about talent loss, you're talking about the Niners, right? Like, they decided to get rid of older players on the defensive front, like Leonard Floyd and Malik Collins, Javon Hargrave. Hargrave barely played last year. The other two did play, but Collins was a good pass rusher, right? Objectively. But his run defense was a little suspect. His ability to be balanced and contained in his approach to rushing the quarterback allowed him to give up too many easy gains in the run game. So Collins is more of a penetrator. I feel like they kind of want to sway towards more of a run defending guy at that position with Robert Saleh. So look for a different type of player there. I think that's why they got rid of him. Leonard Floyd is just like a good producer of volume statistics that doesn't necessarily bring a ton of efficiency to the defensive end at this point in his career. So he's a little bit overrated of a name. So I think he's replaceable, but he is a big name. He was a starter. So Floyd and Collins were starters. Those are losses, despite maybe not being the best starters last year for the Niners, if that makes sense, if you understand what I'm saying. Okay, Hargrave was hurt. Hargrave was pretty good the first year in San Francisco, but really, again, had some flaws in the run game. So the Niners had flaws in the run game when they went to the Super Bowl against Kansas City, flaws in the run game last year. So they kind of want to fix that on the defensive front. The linebacker position, I feel like Dre Greenlaw is a loss, but it's an understandable one because he's coming off a torn Achilles. And Robert Saleh, if he gets anything out of defense, it's the linebacker position. He is great at getting the most out of those guys. And I feel like that's a position that they'll scout well, that they could draft, that they could develop. D. Winters is a name to look out for. Safety, I feel like, guys, people don't know about Mustafa. I feel like corner, people don't know about Green, who's really good. And Charvarius Ward left. That's a big loss because he was a starter. He had a little bit less time last year. He wasn't as good last year. There were things that happened in his personal life. That is a loss to me, big time. I think more so than any of the other losses, other than maybe Dre Greenlaw. Hufanga has not really been playing the last 2 years, so it's honestly not even really that big of a loss. They still really have their two starting safeties from last year. It's just that Jair Brown really isn't, in my opinion, a true starter. So maybe Richie Grant replaces him, maybe Pinnock replaces him, or maybe they draft somebody at that spot. But I kind of feel like the losses, even Jordan Mason, he's their second or their third running back. Like, some of these losses are very overrated. Debo, honestly, like, third receiver at this point on their team. Too much money is he making? So, like, you could not make an argument that Debo right now is better than Brandon Ayuk or Jawan Jennings. Like, you could maybe make an argument he's better than Ricky Pearsall, but projecting forward, I'm not sure that he is. So I totally understand why they let him go. So honestly, like, the Niners are losers because they lost so many players and they made their roster thin, right? They made their roster thinner on the offensive line. They lost Moore. They lost Banks. They made their roster thinner at not really wide receiver because they added Demarcus Robinson, but they made their roster thinner at running back. They made their roster a lot thinner on the D-line, that's for sure. Thinner at linebacker. Like, they're thinner now, but they have 11 draft picks. They still got the rest of the offseason to add. So I think they are a loser because they are less talented, less well-renowned and well-known in some of these names, but they're going to be a lot younger too, which might be something that they definitely needed. So that's the argument for them, is where, like, they're losers, but at the same time, it's kind of a needed loss. Then you've got the Dallas Cowboys, who are losers from their own decision-making, not as much from the 49ers, where it's like, yeah, they kind of needed to be losers. The Dallas Cowboys are just losers because I don't know why they're trying to get all these players that are just not that good. They're busts. Like, I don't know if they were reading past scouting reports. Like Solomon Thomas, 2-year, $8 million. I see how he fits Matt Eberflus's scheme and defense. He's at best a third defensive tackle on your depth chart. Peyton Turner has done absolutely nothing as a first-round pick late in the first round for the Saints a few years back. He's done absolutely nothing. He's a developmental edge player. Javonte Williams was slow as molasses last season. I feel like he is not a starting caliber running back, maybe a second or third running back at this point. Miles Sanders looked awful the last couple of years for the Panthers, played his way out of a role where he had a huge contract in Carolina. So both those guys, I just don't know which one's better. Honestly, they're both trash. Robert Jones is, I like that signing kind of. Like he's like a fringe backup starter type of guard. Like he's not ideal to start, but he can start. So I like those type of signings on the O-line because you can never have enough depth there, especially at a guard position where they lost Zach Martin. They're generally good at scouting that. I think Sanborn is kind of underrated at linebacker, so I don't mind that spot. Kenneth Murray, I like his athleticism and his fit in the pass game for Matt Eberflus, but he's terrible against the run. Kaiir Elam is just really bad at cornerback, but maybe they can find a role for him. Playing in more of a Dallas Eberflus scheme where it's more about the cover three, where he's pressing and he's bailing and he's not moving laterally, he'll be much better in that system, I would project. Turpin is the most electric returner in football, so he's valuable. Odigizua is awesome, so love that return. But honestly, Dante Fowler was their best signing. I think the best guy they brought in 1 year, $8 million, because he's a starting caliber edge player that replaces a guy that they lost in Lawrence or Golston, either one, right? I guess Peyton Turner would be the replacement for Golston, which isn't ideal, but Fowler he's a better pass rusher probably than DeMarcus Lawrence, to be honest. He had 10.5 sacks last year, and he proved that he could play on every snap for the Commanders last year. So Fowler's a good football player, especially in this type of system, right? But he's not very good against the run. So that's something that's concerning, where the Cowboys have been very bad against the run in recent years, and they only got worse this offseason. So that's concerning. You lose DeMarcus Lawrence, you lose Eric Kendricks, you lose some big-time run defending players, and Jordan Lewis at corner is another loss where they didn't really improve from that spot. So Cowboys are definitely losers this offseason. Next, you have the New York Jets, who I think are losers because I don't really know what their vision is, and I don't like some of these signings. I think the biggest one, the marquee one, is obviously Justin Fields. You guys know how I feel about Justin Fields. I've been saying it since day one. I don't even like being a hater of this guy. It's just that he has had the most outrageous hype I've ever seen from any quarterback to ever exist. This is a player that is objectively terrible at football. He cannot throw the ball. He has literally zero vision. I try to be nice to him. I try to be nice when I'm scouting him. I try to be fair with my analysis. He's really athletic. He's fun to watch at times. You can put him in an offense where you can design things to where you limit his passing game. You put him in a play action setting. You get him throwing the deep ball. You get him rolling out of the pocket. You run the ball with him. Things that you can do with him, right? But objectively, he doesn't win football games. He takes too many sacks. He fumbles the ball too much. He's just not good at reading the field. He's just not a good passer. He's just not good at quarterback. He's not a starting caliber quarterback. So to sign him to a 2-year, $40 million deal where you're basically guaranteeing that, I just don't like it. And I just think it's a bad direction for the team to start this new regime off. I just don't like it. Okay. I would rather have had Jameis Winston, who's still out there. I think Jameis is a way better quarterback than Justin Fields. It's not even close. I would have rather have brought in Russell Wilson for just at least the experience and the veteran savviness and the winning, and everyone knows Russ isn't the same player, right? Fields, there's this weird thing. I would never sign Fields because there's this weird existence where people think he has this upside that doesn't exist. People think he's good. So your fan base is going to think you can win with him, which you just can't. Okay, I'm just trying to put that. I would never sign that type of player. I'd rather have the guy that people think is washed. I'd rather have Aaron Rodgers. People think he's washed, right? Brandon Stevens has been not good the last couple of years for the Baltimore Ravens. I kind of liked him once upon a time as a depth corner, but the more he's been exposed to playing starting caliber snaps, the more he's been exposed. So 3-year, $36 million, he's a downgrade at CB2. Andre Sisco is a talented player. $10 million for 1 year, though, is pretty expensive for a player that's been a little bit up and down. But he is a ball hawk, a rangy safety. I like his fit in the defense, and it was a need, okay? Josh Myers, that's fine. He's probably their backup center. He's played a lot of snaps, though, so you can never go wrong with that type of signing. Stone Smart's very athletic. I like him. Rashad Weaver, whatever. Ty Johnson, whatever. Sherwood's back. That might have been their best signing, 3-year, $45 million dog. Isaiah Oliver is a backup nickel corner, whatever. The rest of them, but you look at their offseason and they lost veteran, established Pro Bowl level talent, Devontae Adams, CJ Mosley, Aaron Rodgers. Their wide receiver room is worse. Their quarterback room is worse. Their offensive line, losing Morgan Moses, is worse. Their defensive front is probably a little bit worse. They lost a couple depth players. Their linebacker room is a little bit worse. Their safety room has not really been improved yet. And their corner room is worse. So you look at their entire team, and it's like they're just worse across the board. Like they're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL, and it's because of this free agency. Next, you have the Green Bay Packers. The Packers really did nothing except for they added Aaron Banks and Nate Hobbs, and that's really my complaint. That's why they're a loser, because the Lions stayed about the same. The Bears got a lot better. The Vikings got better, and, with the suspect quarterback thing, but those teams improved or stayed the same. The Packers probably are going to be a little worse. Honestly, just because Christian Watson, their most electric, down-to-down, efficient player. He was guys, I know you wouldn't believe me, but he was top 10 in yards per route run. So Christian Watson, when he's on the field, when he's on the field, he is the most impactful receiver they have. So he's out for a while. Okay, so their receiver room needed help. It didn't get it. Their offensive line, they decided to address that with a player that I think's mid, and they overpaid him in Aaron Banks. Okay. The running back room is good. The quarterback is Jordan Love. He's still fine, whatever. Defensively, they needed a corner and probably 2 corners, maybe 3 corners, right? Because Alexander is probably going to be gone at some point. Nate Hobbs, I like Nate Hobbs. I like him to fit in this defense. I like him to fit in this scheme. He played well under Gus Bradley in this type of scheme before. So I like this fit, okay? But Alexander's going to be gone. So Nate Hobbs as your CB1 is not ideal. He's more of a CB2. He's more of a nickel. Eric Stokes left. Another guy left. I think is it Ballantyne or somebody else left, right? So your corner depth is not there. Your safeties could use a veteran presence. Your defensive front could use some pass rush. They haven't addressed any of that stuff. Maybe they'll go about that in the summer and bring in a veteran pass rusher. But man, the Packers, just look at it from a losing perspective. Yes, they added some pieces, right? Their O-line might be a little bit better, but they spent $77 million on it, right? So, but the Lions are the same. The Bears are better. The Vikings are better. So I'm also accounting for that, where I'm just disappointed that the Packers have not done more to put the chips in. Do something. Trade for DK Metcalf. I don't know. Do something, bro. And then we've got the Atlanta Falcons, where I just think they're the worst front office in football. I think this is the worst general manager in the league. Might be the worst head coach in the league. I just don't think they have any feel or function in this entire, this organization. They lose their center, who's in his prime. So they're worse on the offensive line. They didn't do anything for the offense. They didn't do anything for their young quarterback. Kirk Cousins is killing their cap. Their defense is trash. Leonard Floyd is replacing Matt Judon. They're both equally inefficient as pass rushers. Floyd does put up more snacks and sacks recently. Their linebackers didn't really need to be adjusted, and they signed one anyways, and they don't have a lot of cap, so they signed a third linebacker in Diablo. Morgan Fox will replace Grady Jarrett. That's probably a downgrade. So I don't know what this team is doing. I don't like what they're doing. They still don't have a pass rusher. It's been 15 years. Their CB2 is kind of suspect. Their corner position in general is kind of suspect. Their safety position is suspect, outside of Bates, who's amazing. But I don't know. Their interior D-line's probably worse now. Their O-line's probably worse now. I don't have a lot to say. I just think they don't know what they're doing. I think they're lost. I don't know. Next, we've got the Jacksonville Jags, who are a surprise loser, in my opinion, I think for a lot of people. But when you really think about what they've done, I think they've gotten worse. If you look at it. So wide receiver room, Christian Kirk traded. Who'd you replace him with? De'Ami Brown, a guy that's never caught 40 passes. I like De'Ami Brown. I think he's got upside. I love his speed, things like that, but he's not Christian Kirk. So that's a downgrade, okay? Tight end. You lost Evan Ingram. You replaced him with nobody. All right. Running back, you're the same. Quarterback, you're the same. Hopefully Lawrence can stay healthy. Offensive line-wise, it's Scherf for Macari. So you get younger, you get more versatile, but are you better? I don't know. Center, Mitch Morse retires. You get Rob Hainsey from the Bucks, who more versatile, not as good. Nah. So you're probably worse at receiver, probably a little bit worse on the offensive line, and you're worse at tight end. Defensively, you added a corner in Jordan Lewis, who replaced Ronald Darby. Ronald Darby plays the outside. Jordan Lewis plays the inside. Think they're about the same about a player, like talent-wise. Not sure how that's an upgrade because you already had a nickel corner. You needed a perimeter one. Safety, they lost Andre Sisco, so they're worse. Linebacker, they're the same. Defensive line, they're the same. So I don't know how they got any better. I think they only got worse. Oh, they did replace Sisco with Eric Murray, which that's a downgrade. So they lost Devin Duvernay, who's also kind of a talented returner. So I don't know, man. Like, this team is... I like the young GM. I think he's going to do some good things, and I love Liam Cohen. But from what I've seen so far, they have not been impressive. So that is it, guys. The winners and the losers of NFL free agency 2025. I hope you enjoyed this extensive breakdown. If you did, Gronk, spike the like button and subscribe for more in-depth analysis on the NFL on all 32 teams. It's Mitch. Thanks for watching. Peace.